Cosmos project?
I was engineering workstream leader. I took over from Josh yourself while Cosmos was ongoing.
Yeah, it's a good point. That transition happened. Welcome,
Uh,
Ocean.
yeah, no direct role in the Cosmos work besides just kind of being along for the ride. Um, just one small thing that I just wanted to bring up, which is I hope that I know in the last roadshow and we didn't walk away with like a real crisp list of action items and owners and dates for those to be completed. Um, Maybe today we can try to get to that, and I'm happy to take notes towards the end when we're creating those. But we'll love it if we could walk away with that list.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Nothing from the double A's. So I built the initial POC for Unchained, supporting Cosmos, Osmosis, and Thorchain. Was involved or worked with Kevin on kind of the initial design for Cosmos SDK chains. Other than that, I was advising on and off here and there.
Arena, are you there?
Hey guys, I just joined.
We're just going down the list and just saying what very quickly what was your role on the Cosmos project?
Oh yeah, so me and Hane were responsible for writing the blog post and the Medium article, which we did, and the short announcements. And I think that went well.
All right, thank you. Arwin, are you there? No. CH Cash.
Yes, I'm here. I just joined.
Hey, did you have a role in the Cosmos project?
Yes, I was a part-time contributor on the engineering side.
All right. Thank you. Decentralized J?
Jam guys, I did not have a role here. Just listening.
Cool. Diggy?
GM. I was product workstream leader while this was going on, and I did the UX for Cosmos. And I have to say, Justin, you did test, and you were a release lead a few times while we had Cosmos. So I would say that you did still have a role.
Thanks, Diggy. Ethan?
Hey, GM. Covered short announcements and support for marketing and growth workstream.
I was a product manager. I helped write the spec with Willie, and yeah, helped with all the product needs.
GMO. So worked on web, wrote the initial presentational components for Cosmos, also wired them up to the backend eventually. Delegated a few of these in these two steps to our amazing community contributors, and also eventually did some refactor of Cosmos to make it more consistent with our usual standard architecture in web.
I was in charge of I can help contribute to written marketing content as well as globalized distribution of that content.
All right. Yeah, I was the engineering workstream leader until the end of February. Kobe? No, Lindsay. Gear up.
I oversaw the coordinated launch and reviewed materials to ensure that the launch happened in a coordinated fashion.
Major Hayes?
My involvement was mostly architectural, though I did build the initial Cosmos plugin code to display the asset page.
Marley's not
All
able
right.
to speak.
Yep. Marley can't speak, so Mr. Nerdhair.
Hey, I'm Mr. Nerdhair. I was involved in getting the fancy new protocol buffer-based transaction formats into HD Wallet and Proto TX Builder, and also towards the end, doing work on the key firmware to an updater to get the Cosmos firmware shipped.
I know a couple of people joined since then, but operations team, I was on the operations team, so we tested release testing as well as branch testing before it went into release for engineering and product, and just we're looking for quality control and quality assurance for the project.
I worked on the Cosmos chain adapter, the Cosmos implementation in HD Wallet Keep Key, and added Cosmos support to the Keep Key firmware.
I was the goat no goat leader, and I was the op sign off along with testing.
I was also a QA tester.
I was the operations workstream leader during all of this Cosmos work, and I was also helping our team with testing and deployment testing and releases and support in any way I could in that way.
I was part of the operations team handling the testing.
I wrote the product spec and hosted the kickoff.
All right, cool. Thank you, everybody. So I posted the link to the board in the Engineering Public Text channel. For those who were at the Foxy Retro, what we want to do is just fill in the timeline. All the colored boxes you can duplicate, copy, paste, move them around, and fill in the events. I started this on January 1st. I mean, I know things have been going on since before then, but as far as conceptualizing ideas and but the kickoff was sometime in January, so I decided to not make it too long. And yeah, feel free to get in there and start filling that out now, and we'll start looking at dates too.
Where did you post it, Josh?
Engineering Public, Willie.
Yeah, Engineering Public Text channel.
Thank you.
Hey Josh, for those who aren't in the mural, do you want to broadcast your screen or share your screen so they can watch along, or is it not important this time?
Yeah, I'll do that. Thanks for calling that out. Pasta, were you working on Unchained during this time, or were you just on the firmware?
No, I did a little bit of work on Unchained in February. And then it was chain adapters after Unchained.
All right, can we put in some of that here?
Sure.
And that 319 that says Cosmos Send feature, is that released like into production?
Let me check. That was released shortly after.
I think 322 it got released.
Yeah. Yeah, that was on the next release on 22. Yeah.
When was the our engineering retreat? That was the first week in March, right?
Let me check. Second, it was like 8th through 11th.
Making a note next time I have to make sure all of these dates like line up to actual like start of Mondays for the start of a week. It'll be a little easier to
I've been hunting for when that POC demo I did was. It looks like it was last year in December. No wonder I couldn't find it.
So we had a bunch of thanks for putting all those goat no goats there. What happened after April 7th? There must have been more, right?
I'm pretty sure that we kept trying. We were like real close to launching, and then we kept getting it pushed back at that point. And I don't know if we had another one. I'm not seeing one on my
No.
calendar, at least.
Gotcha.
Hey Josh, just for those who might not be too in the know on the stuff, is it good to kind of talk about the context of how this Cosmos epic came to be, like as a bounty and stuff like that, just so we can understand, how it interacts with the day-to-day operations of the work streams and, the DAO itself?
Say more. Would like say whatever it is that you want to say. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying that, excuse me, like this is kind of a unique, it was kind of a unique project in that, it came, I believe, as outside bounty, correct? And then it was integrated into like the epics for like the, what we want to accomplish as a DAO and get rolled out. Am I incorrect in that assumption? I apologize. It's been out there for a long time.
Yeah, osmosis was the external bounty. And that work was, and that's why I wasn't sure like if we should go all the way back to that in the fall where the osmosis work was done, but then we decided that engineering decided that this work would be better done first, and to set the patterns. And this was not, so it was not a bounty, an external bounty, but it did have some like interweaving with the osmosis bounty. But yeah, so I think DeFi, what would you add to that?
With respect to
like how this came to be that we did when we did the Cosmos kickoff. That's right. It was on December 17th. I had the breakdown on was what I was thinking about, but the kickoff was actually on the 17th of December.
Yeah, confirm those dates. January 6th for the breakdown, 17th for the kickoff. And on the 16th, do you remember we had this conversation basically where we were talking about getting Osmosis into production for the legacy apps? And we realized that there was going to be a lot of work to do that. There's going to be a lot of work to maintain it. There was a high likelihood that with a big change like that, other things would break. So basically on the 16th, that's when I remember that we decided to pause the Osmosis work and that the engineering work stream would prioritize Cosmos. And then once Cosmos was done, it'd be a lot easier to add Osmosis to the new version. And then the 17th, the next day, we did the kickoff.
So you're referring to like pausing the previous implementation, like a strategy to implement osmosis, and then go ahead with this architecture so that the final implementation of Osmo would be easier, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for everyone for all that context. I think it adds a lot to the whole overall retro and stuff. Thanks everyone.
I can add that here too. Okay. And when did it officially go live? Like when was the feature flag turned on in production?
There was two parts to that. So there was like two milestones. The first,
Yeah. We've got the send that was on 312. Was
no 2022 3. That it was not. It was definitely not 312. We did not. That was during the retreat. So like the Cosmos base.
322. 322
Like
it should be.
325 is when we turned on the base functionality.
Okay.
Send receive stuff, and then the 427 was the rest of it.
We want to differentiate the releases and their flag and the ones not on the flag, because it's a bit tricky with the timeline. Some of them like had the flag removed way later on, right? And a lot of these issues were initially released on the flag, which stays for many weeks.
So you're saying the difference between when we release it with feature flag off versus when we turn feature flag on?
Mm-hmm.
Do we know what those dates were?
I'm really kind of considering like it's when the flag goes on, like it's from a user's perspective, like that's what matters ultimately when this gets into a user's hand.
Yeah, I think, and Gomes was saying it would be helpful. I think Gomes, what you were saying, it would be helpful to know when we've shipped with feature flag off.
Yes, because otherwise you don't get all the granularity in the timeline if you just consider with the flag enabled. In the flag off, like no flag. And then you would have basically all these issues into one, which was when the flag was removed, which encapsulates a lot of things.
Right. Do you happen to know? I don't want to spend a ton of time. We just want to do this for another minute or two here. Do you know when we released any of these things with the feature, with the feature flag on or off?
Off would be when we did when we removed it, which is like one event. Well, two events, because there was advanced functionality and base functionality. And flag on is like all the releases when Cosmos issues were included, which is many releases from 1.2 something to 1.6, I guess.
In the next section, Gomes, I'm definitely going to include a section about the feature flags and what a benefit it was to have that ability to be able to test, behind feature flags and turn those on and off and stuff. So I'll mention it a little bit more in the next section.
Okay.
And do we know when it was ready in Unchained? When was Cosmos ready? Like first release?
That was considerably earlier. One sec, I'll pull that mod so yeah. March 22, that was closed on.
I'll add that.
That was for the base stuff. And then March 28th, the rest of the staking delegation was finished for Unchained.
We added feature flag support on March 11.
Did someone add that yet? March 11th? That was the
Actually, it looks like we added hard-coded feature flags in February, and then we added the dynamic feature flag. That's the testers can toggle them on and off.
February is when the
February 2nd, we added the hard-coded feature flag, and then 311 we added dynamic feature flag.
Okay. All right. So see, we broke down the work in January, and then we don't have much there. We have export Cosmos client from Unchained at the end of January. Got the hard-coded feature flag at the beginning of February. Deleting some of these random event things that are here. Initial Cosmos plugin for the assets page was in the middle of February. And then TX history support for chain adapter came at the beginning of March. DeFi took over as the workstream leader. Marketing started writing articles. We started having a bunch of no goats all through March. We got the send feature released at the end of March. And then Unchained finished up about a week later. What's that little one right there? 4.6. Oh man. Cosmos Advanced. I don't know why that is so small. Wire ups under feature flag. Okay. Then a lot of keep key work started. It looks like was we had the Proto TX builder the end of March there. I see a whole bunch of keep key activity in April. Pasta, were you focused on chain adapters before April and then the keep key work started in April?
Let me look. No, the keep keywork started in March, and I was on chain adapters before that.
Yeah, I didn't put in the work he did on the firmware ahead of that point.
Okay.
Yeah, there's the device protocol stuff and firmware work.
In March.
Yeah, starting looks like third week of March, or at least the first push I have of a local dev branch is in third week of March.
Okay, just gonna note that. Okay. And then we not totally sure what happened. I think between this the third Cosmos staking goat no goat and releasing it. I mean, I'm remembering that now where it was like every week we were hoping it would be done, but it wasn't done. Right, there were bugs. We were chasing things down, and then ultimately had it released on April 27th. All right. From looking at this, is there anything anybody wants to add and make sure that is included here?
Probably at the refactor as well. That was quite a lengthy one. Although not user facing, so as you call really.
When was what was refactored and when?
So there was some Cosmos staking refactor, which started on the 13, on the very first work on that of April, and was released, or will be released actually today. Wait, am I getting this right? Yes, 13 to today, April.
Yeah, I think that's important to
This one.
include. And that is Cosmos staking refactor in web.
Yes, precisely.
Okay, you're writing it. You got it.
Oh, I thought you were writing it actually.
Okay, I've got it.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. Anything else? Anyone? DeFi, do you think this accurately captures it enough?
Yeah, the only thing we probably haven't got is the like original attempted like goal of 4-1 for Cosmos staking delegation. I believe it was 322 for the basic stuff.
Okay, I'm just adding that. Okay. All right, well, let's go ahead and add in, please use the sticky notes for what went well, what didn't go well, and we'll make sure we capture action items and put names and dates on them as we talk about these.
Where's the link to this guy, Josh?
In the engineering public voice text channel.
Ah, thanks.
I guess that's another thing to add to the timeline. Kevin wasn't here in all of March, right? Or
That is
April.
correct. All of April, yeah. Last week of March and April.
Okay, we'll just take like another minute or two here. Okay, so we can always add more, and people keep going as we start talking here too. Doesn't mean to stop putting up post-its, but just in the sake of time, we're going to start reviewing some of the stuff here, looking at what went well, and just moving some things around here. So I saw coordination across repositories. Okay, collaboration in engineering, more people, outside contributors, and I saw something else around bounties. Yeah. So bounties worked well. Anyone want to speak directly to any of these, please? Collaboration, communication, synchronization, coordination. A lot of that. Those are all nice positives.
Yeah, I'll just throw out props and thankfulness for having more manpower on Unchained. Sean coming in, doing some Golang concurrency stuff, picking up a lot of knowledge, and I think it was really good to have more mind power in there. Adam helping with multiple pagination stuff. Yeah, it was good to not have it all blocked on me trying to get through it as fast as I can.
And raising a baby.
There was that too.
Yeah, I would like also to give some kudos to our community contributors. Like I did some of the bounty nodes. I think it worked very well for the actual issues that we did. Bounty, although they were not technically bounties, right? Because they were community contributors, but it's the same idea. It was a learning experience for me as well to implement like this web stuff, all the while trying to delegate as much as I could, which I think I could have done a better job of delegating. So there was definitely some learning involved here. And yeah, I think in the future we definitely have some great takeaways from that Cosmos work to yeah, break down issues better and make them more accessible for bounty hunters to start working on them.
Thank you, Gums. How about this agility and pivoting from osmosis to Cosmos once decision was made?
I thought that was good. That basically less than 24 hours after we made the decision to pivot from osmosis to Cosmos, we were able to get the spec together and kick it off.
Got it. Cool. Thank you. And how about the implementation of goats, no goats? Can someone speak to this?
Sure. I could be mistaken, but I think we first had our first goats, no goats for the Cosmos Retro. And I just remember that conversation, and even when the pun came to be, I just think it was handled well. We've been finding our niche between having too many of them, too few of them. But I do like how we're kind of having them early and often, making sure that there's no blockers that we're not aware of, making sure we get marketing, security, and all the other decision makers in the same room early enough. So yeah, I've been happy with how that process has been going.
So this is like a keep doing. And does anyone disagree that we should keep doing goats early and often? Was it a problem for anybody? Okay, cool. Thanks for
My
that.
only comment is those meetings like really aren't go no goes, right? They're really like status update meetings, but that I still think that that's very useful in an Epic to have those meetings periodically for everyone to get a sense of like where all the pieces are at. So despite the fact that I don't think the name quite fits, I
Yeah.
still think the meeting itself was valuable.
Thanks. That's a good point. In the early ones, we really are just talking about knowing where everybody else is. It's not expected that there's going to be a go, right? So, and then feature flags, right? I think everybody likes feature flags. Engineering, operations, product. Super
Yeah.
handy, right?
Yeah, we love them on the product side for sure.
Does anybody have a problem with the feature flags?
The only issue was the original implementation of like the plugins and the flags caused issues in develop for about a week, but they're working well now. I was teething problems with it, but it did delay us a bit.
Was it worth the effort to do the dynamic feature flags for those that had to do the testing?
Yes, absolutely. We absolutely needed those. Like Ops uses those every day.
So I think that kind of points out that like some of the delay in this Epic was having to build out kind of some tooling and some groundwork stuff, that was just missing in the app, right? So
yeah. And what about better coordination across repositories than in the past? Are we
That
talking?
was me. And it might be more coming from my perspective a little bit, but I just felt like I was involved in talking and communicating with more people throughout and trying to like tee things up better and making sure people had, even though we did kind of, I also had a sticky note in the what didn't go well where we kind of self-blocked ourselves waiting for the transaction history when we probably could have done more vertical slice sort of integration on some of the parts that we did have working properly earlier on. So there was a little bit of that as a problem up in the beginning, but once we kind of just made the call to start getting that in place and chain adapters was far enough along with that base Cosmos chain adapter. I was working with Peter and Gomes and everybody, and I just felt like I was more involved and in the know with what was going on full stack, at least. I know I would assume on the converse, knowing more what was going on the back end for some of those other guys. So that was what I was getting at.
Gotcha. Thank you. Okay, let's move over into what didn't go well. People from looking at this, what theme or what's a first topic to discuss here?
I think scope stands out, right?
Scope?
Yeah, I mean, there's like the much too long for a single epic. It kind of summarizes it, and then like
Yeah.
scope Creep, the initial thing, and then the other one I put with like the Kepler, like we missed the biggest wallet. Like that's all kind of scope stuff.
Yeah, I would say Kepler being missed from scope was on the product side. We should have at least planned for that or had it as a stretch goal. But yeah, I completely agree there.
I think we would have done well to break this up into smaller epics so that we have, had like individually delivered milestones. You made some comments about morale seeming to decline, part of the way through this, and I think the reason is because, the finish line was always too far away to have any gauge of where we were in the race, to use another bad analogy. But yeah, I think that may have been a contributing factor to it, right? I think this at the end really seemed to drag on.
What do you? Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I think Pasta's right, and one of the comments that I made in the sheet was kind of related to this, which is like we coupled a bunch of releases together intentionally or unintentionally. Like we coupled the release to a massive Keep Key update. We coupled the release to, well, I think mainly that, right? And so that doesn't seem like it maybe in hindsight. Again, I wasn't involved in a lot of the process, so I don't fully know. But in hindsight, like it seems like we probably should have separated those things. Or launched with like most basic wallet support for Kepler, and then Keep Key supporting Cosmos and all the updating stuff that we added to, and the nice functionality. Like that seemed like a really big, meaty release that could have been broken down.
So
I wonder if we're still coming from the mentality and ShapeShift of having like large all-inclusive features being released, and I think we're still having trouble migrating that to like an iterative development mentality. When the question got brought up of like, oh, can we release this small part of it versus that, I think it was like base Cosmos support versus the delegation. Like we asked ourselves that question, and like it should have been obvious from the beginning that those were kind of separate features. But everyone once presented with the idea was like, yeah, of course, we should iterate like that. But we need to have that mentality more up front of like, what are these deliverable chunks that we can do, rather than scoping out 4 months worth of work all at once.
So I want to provide a bit of an alternative perspective on the Keep Key stuff, because I think that most of the delay and headaches there were not specifically because it was Keep Key, but because we didn't have reference transactions. And we hadn't done the HD wallet and Protobuf TX work and tested them thoroughly enough to find the bugs that implementing Keep Key revealed. Those would have that's sort of a more fundamental level. It shows up on the timeline as part of Keep Key work, but the Keep Key reference transactions, for example, actually ended up being generated with Kepler. So had we tried to, for example, implement Kepler instead of Keep Key, we'd basically have the same sort of problem, where we were running into the same spending 2 days hunting for the difference between the word delegator and delegation, for example, that sort of thing.
Hey, Reed, I think those are good points. I think part of the message that was being relayed here was to separate scope out so that we're not including so many things in one. So just don't couple Keep Key or Kepler with whatever functionality, right? You can just phase it in.
Right. I guess my point is that we need to, even if we're going to decouple things, we need to also recognize we need to not overlook the back end work that's almost implicitly in scope for a lot of things. That's all.
Maybe what I'm hearing is that we still haven't quite gotten to some of the root causes of some of the problems, right? Like, so I think we're saying like, oh, well, keep key was part of the problem. But if you dig down into it, it wasn't keep key specifically, but it was the fact that we didn't do some of the necessary research work for wallet support in general up front. And so we got caught with it at the end of the epic when we should have been doing some of that research work up at the front end of the epic. And if we had,
that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
What I see,
the Kepler work, like at the very beginning, like if one of the first things was like, hey, we want Kepler integrated in order to be able to support Osmosis or Cosmos, then someone would have started that at the beginning. And if that got delayed, it would have been okay because there were other overlapping features at the time. But we kind of inverted. We started doing a lot of UI work and stuff first, and back end work.
We had an entire UI that did stuff that like we couldn't actually run on chain because we had bugs lower level.
If you look at the themes of those 3 action items already, the goats is a function of time. Scope is a function of scope, and flags are a function of quality. Scope, time, and quality are all project management themes. Like that's what I'm seeing as like there's a huge amount of stuff to do, and it felt like there wasn't a single owner for all of that stuff. So it's like that's a joint responsibility between like product and engineering, because we really lack someone that like is full-time dedicated to that function.
So I think that's a fair comment. I mean, I do think that what Major Hayes mentioned though is really important. Like the idea that we release really like the smallest possible pieces of functionality for these things, and if we don't want to blast it out to the world, that's totally fine. But at least they're there, and even maybe behind a feature flag. But like I have a hard time believing that we couldn't have pared this down significantly, given the amount of stuff we released at once. Like it's impressive, right? But I'm sure the release process would have been a lot smoother had we done it in a much more incremental fashion.
So how do we what do we need to do going forward? What do we need to do differently?
I think one of the critical things we need to do is, historically we've been sort of not as comfortable developing HD Wallet like as a separate sort of thing. It's been pushed by the needs of the UI and the higher level stuff, rather than pulling along the project by adding the ability to build features. I think that if we inverted that and we developed, if we want to add Cosmos, let's get HD Wallet working first and get a solid abstraction. And I think it would be a lot easier to build on top of that, even from a UI perspective. And it would avoid a lot of the logjam at the end kind of stuff. Running into icebergs that we didn't plan for because it was sort of an afterthought.
So, are you saying start at the back end first?
Yeah. If we want to add something in the front end, we should add it to the back end first, because we can build all the dialog boxes in the world, but it needs to actually be able to work. Right. So, and we need to be able to make sure that the testing and all that is all hunky-dory, way ahead of the other stuff.
I'd like to hear what some other people think, because there was something about using stage data we found bugs later. Is this here testing against synthetic data instead of on-chain reference TXs hid bugs? Is it important to work on the back end first, or is it do we need to do something else that's different?
So I added that card. The context there is that the HT wallet and KeepKey initial round of updates for Cosmos support, they changed the format of the transactions, obviously because it was protobuf. We didn't regenerate on-chain reference transactions that we go to Block Explorer and verify they actually worked. We just updated all the snapshots. So, it was just testing that what the program output was what the program output. So that's not I think that's part of building the back
I don't know
end.
if this aspect, I don't think helps us break things down smaller. And I want to
maybe part of the problem is the way we're doing the breakdowns. I know in the past when I've sat in breakdown meetings and I'm being shown UI mockups, the questions I ask are, where's that data coming from? Where's that data coming from? How are we getting that? Right? It's fine if we see the wireframes, but if we don't know, the wireframes are good to inform us about what kind of data we need. But then we need to figure out where it's going to come from, right? And we need to figure out what all the interactions are, especially when it comes to wallets and stuff. Maybe part of the problem here was that we didn't quite have a full understanding of the how all the pieces fit together, or what all the all the requirements were. I think when we just have a high level product requirements, it's not as we don't find out about some potential problems until we start doing the technical implementation. So maybe we just need to be a little bit more you can do a product breakdown and then a technical breakdown. That's kind of what we used to do in the old days, right? We would get the user stories and then we would break those down.
We did a product breakdown on December 17th. We did the engineering breakdown on January 6th. At least we did an engineering breakdown. I don't know how much work was broken down. Maybe it wasn't enough. And probably, I think the problem is it was trying to break down too much work, right? I think that's what we're getting at. This should have been a couple smaller epics rather than this one that's too big.
Yeah, the problem is likely just that the engineering breakdowns are insufficiently detailed. And I think the reason that we tend to do this wouldn't be the first time, is because, at the onset, it probably does seem pedantic to go into, excruciatingly specific detail about what's going to be done ahead of time. But I do think that if we had done this on this and previous epics where we've had the same outcome, we probably would have ended up saving time in the long run. So I think, a good strategy might be to break things down to the level of specific ticket assignment right at the onset, rather than doing all of the high level work and some ticket assignment and figuring it out as we go along. And even if that takes several days, right? I think we have probably at least in this case, lost multiples of that due to unexpected complications along the way.
Other comments on that?
I agree with that, and I think that I think one of the problems is we may have moved forward on this epic before we understood, there were still unknowns on certain things when we started it, but we're like, we'll just figure it out when we get there. And there maybe wasn't enough upfront, trying to solve for the unknowns. And I think one thing that we can do with that is overlap epics. And what I mean by that is that while we're finishing up dev work on one epic, we can begin some of the planning meetings, because the planning meetings, you can do an hour or two on a Monday, and then maybe there's a couple of we need to figure this thing out, and then someone goes and does a little bit of work. It kind of takes some time. So if you wait till you're done with an epic and then start the next one, and then you're kind of doing your planning, it's kind of like, well, what do you do in the meantime when you're not planning and you just have one other person, trying to figure some stuff out? If you overlap the planning and the dev work a little bit more, we might be able to transition through stuff a little bit easier and take more time in the planning stage, because we can kind of spread that out over, let's say, a week or two. Whereas if we finish an epic and then start the planning, if we feel like we need to rush through the planning, because otherwise we don't have anything else to do, right? Because we're done with our other work. So something like that, maybe.
I would add another aspect to this is I feel like our planning is too like theoretical, and we just talk about the ideas and these like higher arching concepts about like the epic, as opposed to doing more on like proof of concepting and researching and spiking as part of that planning step to try to uncover some of the unknowns, and having that be part of that whole planning phase.
Yeah,
Or
it's
at
all part of
least
this just like smaller deliverable thing, right? Like if you look at something like the wallet migration epic, like it was a much smaller epic and you could just see it move from left to right, whereas like there was no line in the sand with Cosmos. There was only really two major deliverables.
DeFi, you bring up a super good counter example to this epic. The wallet migration work, I think, was well done. Like the whole process from the beginning to the end, I think was really well done. And there's a couple things I saw there that I think we should learn from, which is one up front, like we reviewed the requirements from product, right? We had a healthy engineering discussion about ways to solve that. We got into the nitty gritty technical details in that, right? Like how would we implement these two different ways? It was like OAuth versus not OAuth, right? And during that discussion, what we found out is if we went the OAuth route, we had these unknowns. How are we going to do the redirects? How do we handle this with a static site with no backend, right? Whereas the other path, it was like, well, we've all done an Express app. We have all done this. We know exactly like how to do this. And so I said, okay, I'm willing to change my idea, right? And go with the one that's more certain over less certain. And because things were had a lot of certainty in those tickets, like people knew exactly, like we knew, okay, we need an API that does this. It needs to be this way. It needs to have a Docker file. It needs to have these things. Like we knew, I mean, it was laid out like technical requirements. We need these very specific things. And when people went to go do the work, it was just like boom, 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 boom. And it just got done because there was no uncertainty, right? It was all very clear.
A bunch of other benefits came out, like Theo owned the front end, Adam owned the back end. The tickets were well defined. Like I think it was Neomaking or CH Cash did a lot of the like community member implementation of that stuff. Like it got bountied out quickly. The PR reviews were easy. Like the tickets just moved through quickly. There was minimal blockers and risk. So like it all came down to smaller scope and more rigorous planning.
Yeah, and it's much easier to do the security review too, especially when all the the architectural level stuff has all been planned out and considered independently, and that was just much easier.
I think that's a good point and valid for use cases or problem sets that can be planned out, or you do know and can determine like that kind of path where it's like, oh yeah, we've done it this way, so we know that this is the strategy and can fully talk through it. Something where it's like a new chain where there's not like full domain knowledge and you're there. We don't really have an R&D phase. Like I didn't R&D Cosmos. Is basically the little bits and pieces that I picked up beforehand, and then we jump into the epic, and it's like, well, need to figure out what all the endpoints are. We need to figure out how to use it. Made some assumptions. Half of them weren't true because there wasn't really that R&D or POC phase to something that we just don't know. We can't know unless we do some of that. Like it's nice if we do have the domain knowledge or some expertise. Like Adam was a good resource, but there was still some weird edge cases in situations. It's like none of us had done it. So that's the piece where I feel like a more even multi-stage kind of planning process to like start high level, understand some of those spikes or R&D phase, fully flesh those out, regroup, replan, and kind of iterate as long as it takes, or continuously, more continuously than maybe we do, to make sure that everything's still on track.
So like
yeah, and I think that comes down to unknowns, right? Like the epics that go well are the ones that where there's few to no unknowns, and then the ones that go poorly are the ones where there's lots of unknowns.
But I
And
think
I
what we're
totally
trying
agree with
to
you.
solve the problem
Oh.
of is the unknowns, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I totally agree with you that we should POC more stuff. That's exactly what, like, service workers, right? Like it was like, okay, let's get a POC that up, up and running. It was like the plugin stuff. When I started the plugin stuff, it was a POC. It wasn't functional code really at the beginning, and it was like we iterated on that proof of concept to kind of understand how things would work. So,
right, and it
and
had a
that's
lot
what
of
I'm talking about
replanning along
overlapping.
the way, right?
Exactly. So this overlapping idea, right, of like we've got devs working on this, but we also have guys that are going out and doing POCs, figuring out these unknowns, so that when we're ready for everybody to start, or on the next epic, that we've figured all of that stuff out. And we should be wary to start work on an epic if there are a lot of unknowns. Like we need to make sure we're calling that out.
And sorry,
I'll let you go, Nerd Hair.
And you also brought up a important thing that I don't think we've mentioned explicitly, which is that Cosmos isn't just a new chain; it's like a new chain type, essentially. Like we had Cosmos support before, but then they changed a bunch of stuff out from under us, and I think that's probably part of the reason that we didn't we weren't more conscious of the level of effort that was going to be required on the back end stuff, because we already had Cosmos support, but a lot of that stuff, most of it turned out to be useless on the back end, and we had to, revamp it. I mean, not useless, but whatever. We had to touch it all in order to fix it up. So, adding Cosmos Hub the chain and Atom the asset, that's one thing, but that R&D and POC stuff would have been real useful in order to prove out that we had that backing capability and reduce the risk of whatever change the Proto TX stuff changes that they've made.
Yeah, totally. I just feel like we have this mindset, or it feels to me at least, that we have this kickoff and we have this breakdown, and kind of like everything's supposed to be like known and solved, and off we go to the races to finish everything, and like that's kind of that. And I mean, every project or new feature I've worked on with just a smaller group like Orion in the past, et cetera, it's been constant regroups and like sub kickoffs and stuff as we reflect and learn new things, and we might have to change where things are going more for these unknown unknowns. Like it's great if we could figure out everything up front, but yeah, I'm talking more the unknown unknowns. And you bring up a good point, Chris, of trying to parallelize and do some of that R&D up front before maybe some of these formal kickoffs, so we have a little bit more information to go off of and make those more productive.
And if you don't have like the ability to do some prep like this before a breakdown, do you just need to do we first need to just define a couple POCs, and like the first epics is just a POC or two, maybe a front end and a back end, or I don't know exactly what, but then you come back after that to break the work down?
Yeah, that's essentially what I'm suggesting. Like if we don't have enough of the knowledge or details or expertise up front to fully have a confident breakdown, and it's like, yeah, we all are totally on the same page, we got all the cards laid out, like we're ready to do this, then yeah, I think it needs to be a more of an iterative breakdown approach where we learn more, we reassess, make sure we're still on the same page, still on track, create more cards that came out of that. Are there any more unknown unknowns? Let's do that. And ideally, some of that could be done up front a little bit, to Chris's point, where we don't have to like stall the whole process and entire features just to wait for this. Like it should probably be preemptively kind of been doing some of this, maybe on a slightly smaller scope of people, just for use of resources. But yeah, that's the general gist I guess I'm getting at, is kind of like, instead of YOLOing it and just trying to do it as it comes and create a deadline up front when we have no freaking idea, like do more subsequent breakdowns until we do fully know and can confidently say, yeah, this is a deadline we want to shoot for. We know ideally know everything. Like there's always shit that comes up, but you know, not kind of your 95 P95 level confidence sort of scenario.
Okay, so what kind of action item do we have here? Like, who is gonna do what by when in regards to this?
Well, we could interview a project manager.
Got that in 10 minutes.
Yeah, I was kind of being sarcastic.
Yeah.
I mean, is there like, yeah.
In the interim, I mean, like product, like looking back to centralized days, kind of manage that function. Does product have any bandwidth currently before we're able to hire a technical program manager that would largely fill this function? Like to Fox McCloud or Decentralized J, we have, at least for the ongoing epics at the moment, pretty good boards which we're like using in stand up to track stuff, and I think that's working better than it was for the Cosmos thing at the moment. Does product have any appetite or bandwidth to be able to do that in the interim until we can get like a dedicated role for that function?
Yeah, I think we can help out in that regard. I think we should talk about more specifically what we intend that role to do in the meantime, so that they have that Justin and Noah have a clear sense of what would be required.
Yeah, going off that, definitely happy to help and throw my hat into the ring wherever I can. But don't want to downplay, I think, the need for a technical project manager. Honestly, we're talking a lot about these unknown unknowns, and I'm happy to, dive in, do some research, and try to figure out some of these. But in all honesty, a lot of you engineers are a lot smarter than I am, especially on the technical side. So if there are complexities around some of the technical aspects that you guys can't understand, I just feel like it's a bit of an uphill battle for me trying to figure out these unknown unknowns beforehand. But happy to try. But yeah, might need some guidance in all honesty.
Yeah, I think my thought would be like, hey, let's go look out and see what the next like one or two epics are on the roadmap after the ones that we already have planned, and like start the planning on those now. But that could be one meeting a week. It doesn't have to be really time intensive, but we could start like, hey, after these couple epics that we've got going, we're going to work on X. We want to work on X feature or whatever, right? And then we can start doing the planning on there, start doing looking at the requirements, what are the breakdowns, and then there the engineers can start asking the questions, right? Like, well, I'm not quite sure how this is going to work, or we've never worked with this wallet before. And then you can start assigning, okay, let's get a little proof of concept. You haven't worked with this wallet before, go spin up a super simple little app and integrate that wallet in and play around with it and get an idea of how it works and what we need to know. Okay, now from there we can, we know a little bit better, and we can write that stuff down into the ticket for whoever needs to do the HD wallet work. Like, okay, if you're going to do the HD wallet work, here's the docs that I found. Here's my proof of concept that you can go look at. et cetera, et cetera. Then when someone goes to do that work, when the epic finally comes up, like all they have to do is follow the instructions. There's no, figuring things out that has to happen.
Yeah,
that kind of stuff, I think.
I like that
Exactly what
idea.
aligns with the outcome of the retreat, right? Like our jobs are to build that foundation, do the upfront groundwork. Like let's have fully spec'd issues and tickets and bountyable stuff. And it's like everybody else can do that. Those can all be bountied. Like it should be easy at that point. And if we get ahead of the game, then we're always kind of playing catch up. So I feel like if we start getting more ahead of the game, that can be our primary focus as we're moving along and scoping out the work for these upcoming things so that everything's teed up to be bountied and just worked on by the whole community after the
Yeah,
fact.
I think that's some great insight and guidance. One thing I'll say to that is let's just make sure, I guess, that we're all kind of aware of this ask. I know sometimes as we're finishing up other epics, we're definitely heads down. And sometimes it is hard to do that context switching and multitasking. And sometimes if I am bringing up, hey, let's talk about an epic that's coming up a month from now or a few weeks from now, the priority very often is, well, we got to focus on this one because it's what we're currently working on. And I understand that's a very hard balancing act to, be working on what's in front of us, but also be aware of what's coming down the pipeline. So just being aware of that challenge.
So I wrote roadmap reviews to map the upcoming unknowns. I mean, and I guess the idea there too is then to also create tickets, create research tickets for that. Is that right?
Yeah, I think like identifying where we need to do spikes before we even do a true kickoff is a really good idea.
Kind of a chicken egg thing. Like the kickoff is like the first where like engineering is aware of like the full spec. It's like I think we have to be flexible of saying like, we did a spike and this is the impact and this is how it affects the scope, and be willing to like cut scope accordingly or push it out past a different milestone.
Yeah, I would distinguish like kickoff from like a true like breakdown. Kickoffs are good to get everyone on the same page for what the ask is, what the feature is, know what it's like. Okay, these are things that we should look into, and then the breakdown being the actual, yeah, given all this information, what's the outcome of this? How are we going to actually get this fully?
So maybe it's also, potentially building in a little bit more time between the kickoff and the breakdown, so we have time to fledge out all those spikes and actually go into detail. It's not just like, all right, kickoff, all right, next day let's meet and break them all down. And respecting that some of these do need deeper dive. Yeah,
I mean the process we had previously, and I thought I'd seen that followed here, is that we do a kickoff with the product team, then we do the first like engineering review, which is to define spikes. And then once those spikes are done, then we meet to do the breakdown. Now I'm hearing pretty clearly here that one breakdown is not enough, right? That we need to we need to get clear about what else we don't know and try to find it. But I'm also hearing that if work goes along, Kevin's point, that something else is uncovered and it's coming back again. All right, we have some new information. How does that change our plan? So,
yeah, I think that's the part that we fail on. Maybe partially from the engineers, maybe not raising that high enough and really calling that to action. Because I remember we kind of boilerplated a bunch of tickets out front for the Cosmos, where it's like, yeah, we know that we're going to need sends and receives and all these standard things, and they're kind of just empty tickets. We went back through, filled in a few of them. There were some spiky sort of tickets that stuff did come out of that, but we never really readdressed and reassessed from there. So it's a shortcoming, of us as well for not re-raising that and redressing it. So it'll definitely be a collaborative effort to make sure that actually does happen. That is a big thing that I've found the PMs helpful for in the past is making sure that kind of stuff happens, as opposed to us engineers just like keeping cranking away and neglecting to do some of those sort of actions, but
Yeah, being a little closer to the challenges that are coming up during the development, right? And helping pull people together and raise visibility for that.
Right.
That's
Apologies.
definitely
Apologies,
one
while I
thing.
have a hard stop, but this was great. I'll let you wrap it up, Josh.
Okay. So the one thing we don't have here, right? So we still really don't have a clearly defined action item here. So product managers are gonna help in the execution of the epics to raise visibility both among the team and even like outside of the team that's doing the work, like raise things to DeFi and Diggy when there's potential issues or unknowns that are really getting in the way.
Don't we
And
have like a weekly or bi-weekly like product roadmap review?
We do.
so that's the EMPM sync, right? Is that what you're thinking about, Diggy? Every other Monday?
No, we also have actually a roadmap review on the calendar that's twice a month or every other week.
Yeah. So I think that, so here, I think we can have a distinct action item, which is the next one of these meetings. Let's go look out at an upcoming epic that's, weeks to a month out. And let's pick it. Let's go, okay, are there requirements for this one yet? If not, let's get those written. Let's set up another meeting to review the requirements, right? So let's just pick an epic and try to do this. Like, let's try to do some planning, even though the rest of us are working on other epics in the meantime. Let's see if we can't get some planning going for something coming up in the future.
Chris, are you willing to put your name on making sure that happens?
Sure.
Okay.
The next one of those is on the 16th on Monday. So that would be a perfect time.
Do you have it on your calendar, Chris?
What time is it?
It is next month or this coming Monday at, I just saw
2:30.
Yeah, 2:30.
Do
And
you
it's
need it?
it's always every other from that EMPM. It's on the non-Monday that happens.
Chris, do you need us to move
Okay.
it earlier?
No, I don't need that. In fact, no, that's fine for now. I'll let you know if things change.
Okay. All right. So that's the only specific like deliverable, the action item with a date and a name. It's in the effort to bring more visibility into the unknowns and have more breakdowns, more POCs, smaller epics. But yeah, that's really the only. Is there anything else that we can call out as a specific action item for someone here?
I think too on the product side and in potentially even in that meeting as we go through scope on things, like we probably could have done better on the product side for this Cosmos to try to break it down more on the product side from the beginning. So when we start to identify like the UI UX and the specifications for product, I think we can do a better job going forward of just saying like, is this too much at once? And like, how can we break this out potentially on the product side into smaller pieces?
Yeah. Okay.
Do the product features have the sense of like milestones in them, like when you write out the requirements?
Well, what we did, at least for like wallet migration, obviously that's going to have other pieces. So we just did the first piece, as you guys know. But we could do that too. Put milestones as far as like the spec goes. I think that's a great idea.
Okay, so the next epic starts. The PMs will make it a point to check with the teams on the reasonableness of the scope.
That sounds good.
Ocean, you had this specific request about action items with dates and names. Do you have anything that you're seeing here that we can add as something with that?
Not specifically that we haven't already addressed. I think there were some good next steps. I guess I'd just be curious, like how this would get published, and so like how we would check back in on the action items being completed that we did outline.
Yeah, that's a good question. We can do this in probably. This is all about. We didn't even talk about the marketing stuff that happened. I apologize for the marketing folks that are here. We didn't get to that at all. Maybe this can be a topic for the EMPM powwow that will happen on the a week from the 16th is. How does that sound, Diggy? And
Josh, this is Lindsay.
Yeah.
I think that part is pretty simple. We had our materials very much in alignment and ready to go, and had everybody involved in launching ready and on point, and just tweets went out in advance. And then they got shared in advance. And I think everybody involved in sort of tweeting that out in advance kind of put pressure on us to get it out sooner than maybe people were comfortable with. But once it goes viral, there's a bit of that pressure. But I think everybody involved in that kind of said, oops, yeah, I won't do that again. So I think we have a tighter process in keeping people behind marketing so that we have a go as well as engineering. And I think that's been refined a bit.
So no individual social shares until go from marketing.
Really until the official marketing materials get launched, and then sharing happens afterwards.
That might be a really good thing to remind everyone during like the go no go meetings, just consistently, because like everyone gets excited. And yeah, so I mean, that might be something we could just like try to hammer home in those meetings as we get closer to launches.
Yeah, and this is an old problem, and we saw this at Centralized too, and it is something to remind people from time to time.
Okay. So Lindsay, you need to reiterate that in the GOAT meetings, or someone. Are you in those meetings, Lindsay?
It depends. We're empowering people who maybe are sort of the point person on content to be in those. So sometimes it's me or H Payne or Arena or Toasty. So we'll just make sure that the team is on point, especially for big launches, to be reminding people.
Okay. And then we can follow up on these action items in the next EMPM meeting on 5/23. Okay. I think that's it, everybody. Thanks a lot. Really appreciate your